All right, everybody. Looks like today is the day. Today is the day where we find out. Are we going to get 6 more weeks of winter, or is spring starting? Per Bob Condota on Twitter, the end of season meeting between Pete Carroll and Jody Allen had not happened as of yesterday, and he believes that it will be happening today, Thursday. So at some point today, it is believed that Carroll and Allen will meet, discuss the future of the team, and by the end of that meeting, it is very likely that both parties will know whether or not Pete Carroll is still going to be employed with the team past this season. Now, everybody's kind of already assuming that he's going to be back. A lot of the energy right now in the building and in the media is that he's going to be back, but only Jody can really know. It's Jody's call to make at the end of the day. Presumably, she has people like Chuck Arnold in her ear. And I think that at the end of the day, we can't really know what's going on in that head of hers because this is the first time she's ever had to go through something like this as the owner of this team. And I do stand by what I've said the last few days, maybe even the last couple weeks, where it feels like it's going to be running it back in 2022. We're going to have the same coaches, a lot of the same players. We're going to be going for the Super Bowl in 2022. Whether or not that ends up being a good idea remains to be seen. Whether or not that's realistic remains to be seen. But I think that is probably what is going to happen. However, I also stand by the things I've said over the last 2.5 years, where I have criticized Carroll heavily and have begun to suggest that it's time for him to move on and the Seahawks to go in a different direction. And I know some of you guys are sick of hearing it. There are some Carroll defenders in my comments, and hey, whatever. It doesn't really affect me if people think differently than how I think. But this could be the last chance I have for a little while. So in this video, I'm going to make, you could call it my final pitch. My final pitch for why the Seahawks should move on from Carroll. Because, look, you can say what needs to be said about a lot of pieces on this team. Assistant coaches, coordinators, position coaches, players, da-da-da-da-da. Maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. But I very firmly believe that this team will not get to where we want them to get to again with Pete Carroll as the head coach. So I'm going to make one final plea to Jody Allen and the Seahawks franchise and organization and explain why I think Carroll needs to go. So, first of all, I've said this before. I said it recently, but I guess I have to say it again. This is not about one bad year, okay? This is not about one bad year. A lot of people in my comments still say this. Oh, you can't fire a head coach after all these winning years because of one bad year. This is not about one bad year. You guys see one bad year, but let me tell you what I see. I see 7 years of irrelevance. And I know that sounds like a harsh word, but let me ask you, looking at the last 7 seasons of Seahawks football, is there anything that we accomplished in those 7 seasons that you think 60 years from now people are going to be telling their grandkids about? Because I know Seahawks fans are going to be telling their grandkids about winning the Super Bowl in 2013, making the Super Bowl and losing by a yard in 2014. Some of them might even tell them about the 2012 season because that was the first year of Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner and the dominance of the Legion of Boom. So I could see people talking about those years. But do you think people in 60 years are going to be telling their grandkids about the time the Seahawks won a playoff game against a mediocre Vikings team because Blair Walsh missed a 2-foot field goal? Are we going to be telling our grandkids about the time that we beat the Eagles practice squad by 1 score? Are we going to tell them about the time we racked up a bunch of wins against bad teams in the regular season in 2020 and then got plastered at home in the wild card round? I don't think so. I seriously doubt it. And I think that is a real problem when you take a look at the pieces that Carroll had to work with going into that 2015 season. 7 years of not making the conference championship round. 7 years of not having a deep run. 3 playoff wins. And by the way, if you want to reduce it a little bit, I've done this before, but let's do it again. This 4-year span right here, the post-Legion of Boom rebuild has produced 1 playoff win and has now actually produced a product that you could genuinely call bad, 7-10. So it seems like it's already peaked. It peaked beating the Eagles practice squad in 2019. Was that worth the whole rebuild? Is that worth 4 years of our time to win 1 playoff game against a terrible opponent that had no business even playing in that game? Is that what we're here for? I certainly hope not. So, yeah, it's not just 1 bad season. It is 7 years of not getting to the top. And that would be totally understandable if maybe we didn't have a great roster, right? What if Pete Carroll was just the head coach and the GM wasn't good at bringing in talent and we couldn't find a quarterback? Then this would be amazing. If Pete Carroll took over a team like the Jaguars and produced these results, 3 playoff wins in 7 years, a bunch of winning teams, yeah, he would be incredible. But that's not what happened here in Seattle over the last 7 years. Carroll's had a quarterback. Not just the quarterback, which is, by the way, a huge chunk of the battle right there, but he's had a lot of other really tasty pieces. He's had Bobby Wagner. For almost all of it, he had KJ Wright. For parts of it, he had Sherman and Chancellor and Earl Thomas. He's had, during the second half of it, he had guys like Dwayne Brown, DK Metcalf. He's had Tyler Lockett for the whole thing. Quandre Diggs for the last 2.5 years, basically. He's had pretty nice cuts of talent. And by the way, he's basically our general manager, so bringing in more talent, if that even is the problem, is on him. But I'm seeing a pretty solid base of talent that he got to work with. So I'm not seeing a good excuse for this team not being able to break through once in a 7-year span. There are players who I didn't even mention in that little spiel just now, because there are honestly a lot of them. Doug Baldwin had a great run at the start of that 2015 period. Chris Carson has been a quality running back for the last 5 years, or, well, I guess you would say 4 years for this team. Often hurt, but still very productive. He's had the players to make it happen. Jimmy Graham for the first 3 years. I'm going to stop listing players, but it could really go on and on. This is not a team like the Detroit Lions or the Jacksonville Jaguars that didn't have the talent to make that run. The talent's been here, primarily in a quarterback. A lot of teams would kill to have had a franchise quarterback in place in pretty much every game we played the last 7 years. Russell Wilson has missed how many games over that 7-year span? 3.5, basically? It's pretty good. There are other franchise quarterbacks out there who have missed whole seasons worth of games. But Wilson, he's been there almost every game, and yet we can't break through. And why can't we break through? I think it's because we have struggled to replace the talent that was injecting this team with Super Bowl caliber life over those first 3 years with guys like Wilson and Wagner and I guess Bruce Irvin. It just hasn't been there. And why is that the case? Let's take a look at the 3 different facets. Okay, drafting. Now, again, Carroll's basically the GM. We know he has final say on personnel decisions. So yes, Schneider's the GM and he may deserve some blame. But I'm looking at Pete before I'm looking at John. So let's look at these drafts since the Wagner-Wilson draft, which was a phenomenal draft class. All right, let's start at 2013. So basically the last 9 years of drafts. We're coming up on a decade worth of drafts, and what has it produced? All right, look at this list of players right here. Who did anything for this team? The best player for the Seahawks by a pretty wide margin was Luke Wilson. Okay? Luke Wilson was probably the best player we got out of this class in terms of contributions for this team. And his career stats look like a good season from Travis Kelce. All right, there's nothing from this class. We may as well have set all our draft picks on fire for as much as these picks actually helped us. This is one of the worst, most pathetic draft classes I've ever seen. And I know we didn't have a first rounder, but we had a lot. We had a lot of picks overall, and we barely got anything out of it. 2014. Justin Britt's probably the best of them. He gave us a few terrible years at tackle and guard, and then he gave us like 2 good years at center. And that's about it. That's the best you can do. Paul Richardson, he had some moments. Decent player. But not worth the second round pick. Cassius Marsh, Jag. Kevin Pierre-Louis, decent special teamer, I guess. Bunch of guys who basically never played for the Seahawks. Terrible. 2015, okay, we get off to a nice start here. Frank Clark, Tyler Lockett, okay. And then what? Mark Lewinsky became a good player when he went somewhere else. He went to the Colts, became a good player. Didn't really do anything here. Third best contributor here would actually be UDFA Thomas Rawls. So we've got some decent top-end talent, but absolutely no depth to speak of. Most of these guys never even played. Remember Sokolai, Ryan Murphy? Barely ever got on the field. Terry Poole literally never got on the field. Could have taken Shaq Mason with that pick, I think, by the way, if I recall correctly. Just putting that out there. 2016, Jermaine Ifedi, basically the poster child for the Tom Cable ineptitude the last few years he was here. Terrible. Awful first-round pick. Jerron Reed, pretty good. Couple of Jags. CJ Prosise could never get his feet underneath him. Quint Jefferson, Jag. Alex Collins did his best work in Baltimore. Best we got from this class, Jerron Reed. He had a few good years here. Solid, decent player. Ultimately, nothing special. Nothing anybody's going to write home about. Not really a guy who ever made Pro Bowl type plays. Just whatever. 2017. Malik McDowell. Need I say any more? Probably the best we did from this class was either Shaq Griffin. Good pick, solid pick. Even if we didn't keep him past his rookie deal. And I guess Chris Carson. Great value with Chris Carson, no doubt about it. I have nothing bad to say about Chris Carson. Awesome 7th round pick. But in between all that, you have all this garbage. Ethan Posick, you probably ruined him by playing him out of position, but we're not getting a whole lot out of him for what we used to draft him. We've got 3 safeties picked in the top 200 here. Hill, Thompson, Tyson. None of them ever really did anything to help this team win. And even Shaq Griffin, he didn't stay past his rookie deal. So, yeah, he was good. He's a good player. It was nice to have him around. He had some good moments. He had some good years. But at the end of the day, if that's the best you can do, that tells you why things are starting to slip away from you. 2018. Yeah, Rashad Penny. Look, we can bust a nut as much as we want to about what he's done the last couple months. But the bottom line is Rashad Penny's rookie deal is now up. And he's got, less than 1,800 career yards? Yeah, first round pick, not good enough. And we'll see where he goes from here. But as of right now, this is a bad pick. It's a bad pick. He's got some time to correct that, but his rookie deal was a waste. Best player we got here might be Michael Dixon. It's a punter. Don't get me wrong, it's valuable. He's a good player. Love Michael Dixon. But I think the most high-impact player you've gotten from this class may have been UDFA Poona Ford. You've got some decent pieces. Rasheem Green isn't the worst player in the world. Will Dissly's okay. Decent blocking tight end. Decent number 2 tight end. Jacob Martin had a pretty decent year, and then you flipped him for some value with the Clowney trade, but not good. Not really good. 2019, it goes on and on. 2 busts with your first 2 picks. Collier, trash. Blair, you draft him with a top 50 pick, and then you immediately go, I don't really like this guy. I'm going to trade for Quandre Diggs because we can't trust Tedrick Thompson anymore. And then I think Tedrick got hurt. That's how little you trusted Marquise Blair. You spent a top 50 pick on him. He gets a golden opportunity to start playing his rookie year, and then you go, we're going to trade for this guy. Good trade, but still. Now, Metcalf pick, awesome. Ugo's been okay. Homer, decent value here. He's a quality player. In between, you've got garbage like Gary Jennings Jr. Phil Haynes basically doesn't play. Ben Burke-Irvin's just a special teamer. John Ursua basically hasn't played. Eh, not that good, not special. 2020. This is the only draft class of the last 9 years now, basically, that looks like a real draft class. This looks like a real draft class so far, and it's early. We don't know yet, but Jordan Brooks looks like a long-term starter on the D. So does Darrell Taylor. Solid picks. Okay. Damian Lewis, if he moves back to right guard, I think he can be a long-term starter. You've got quality depth here. Parkinson, DJ, Robinson, Swain. They've made an impact on this team over the last 2 years, and it seems like they at least belong in the NFL. This is the one class that, as of right now, looks like a real draft class that actually boosts your team up. All these other ones that I've gone through, they either keep your team in the same place or they drag it down. And then this most recent draft class, like, who the hell knows, right? It's 3 picks plus Curhan. Trey Brown's got a chance. Eskridge, we'll see. Forsyth, way too early to guess, but we'll find out about this one in the coming years. But that is 9 years of pretty bad drafting. We got one draft class that looks like it might be a real, actual, bona fide helping draft class. You had one draft class that kind of came close because at least your top end was good. And then it's a bunch of crap, man. If the Seahawks had a guy who was just picking chalk these last 9 years, JS pointed this out in a stream the other night, how much better would we have been? A lot better. Okay, so there's your drafts. We're not doing a good job bringing in new talent via the draft. So you can do it via trade. What are the home run trades the Seahawks have done in this period of time, since 2013, basically? Percy Harvin, first-round pick, third-round pick, seventh-round pick. Awful. Need I go on? If you guys root for this team and you guys know what's up, you guys know this is terrible trade, awful trade, didn't work at all. And then 2 years later, they decide, okay, that really didn't work. Let's try it again. Jimmy Graham. 2 years later, I think it was 2 years later after the Percy trade. Jimmy Graham, fourth rounder, 4. Max Unger and a first rounder. Now, I don't hate this trade like some people do. I don't think Max Unger played that great after he went to New Orleans. I know he was kind of injury prone. I'm cool with it. And I don't think Jimmy Graham was bad here at all. But the bottom line is you traded for Jimmy Graham and you made him play as an inline tight end when you knew he excelled as basically a glorified receiver. You knew that. You had years and years of tape to fall back on to know that the Saints used him that way. You brought him in thinking he could play like a normal tight end, and you got something that was much less remarkable than what you thought you were going to get when you made the trade. So, at best, it's a push. I can't really call it a good trade. And this kind of trade gets remembered poorly. Okay, well, what's the next big-time trade? When's the next time you decided to try to swing for the fences a little bit here? How about Sheldon Richardson? Jermaine Kearse and a second-round pick? That's pretty meaty. I'll chalk that one up as being kind of significant. So, I like Sheldon Richardson. He's a good player. But bottom line is this. You traded a second-round pick and a half-decent receiver for Sheldon Richardson. You kept him for 1 year. You did not make the playoffs. Richardson didn't really do that much for you, although he did have a good season. And then you let him go and you got nothing, not even a comp pick. That's kind of a disaster. If you didn't want to extend him, then why did you trade for him? If you wanted to trade for him, then why didn't you extend him? It's like something that a Madden player who's 10 years old would do. They just do things without thinking about long-term plans or potential consequences. They just do things. And we ended up getting fleeced by the Jets. Okay, what's the next big trade? I think you guys know where this is going. I think you guys have some idea of where this is headed. Yeah, let's keep on going here. Do you guys even want to look at it? I don't. Jamal Adams, 2 first-rounders, a third. One of those first-rounders now being a top 10 pick, by the way. And Bradley McDougald, decent safety. You swung for the fences, and you missed by 10 feet. Not because Jamal Adams is bad, but because you clearly traded for him without a great plan on how to utilize his talents. He's a primo talented player, but you've got him playing deep safety most of the time. You blitz him 10% of the time. Which is weird to me because in 2020, that first year, you were blitzing him a lot and it worked well. This year, you just decided, nah, you know what? We're just going to play him like he's Bradley McDougald. We're just going to have him drop back a lot. He's just going to be deep safety most of the time. I don't get it. So, again, it's like some kid in Madden just trying to get all the best players without really thinking it through. If you're going to trade for Jamal Adams, then play him like Jamal Adams. If you don't want to play him like Jamal Adams, then don't trade for him. Just go with Bradley McDougald. The trades we do hit on tend to be the smaller ones. Carlos Dunlap, that was a good trade. Quandre Diggs, that was a good trade. The Clowney trade, it was okay. Only kept him for a year. Again, you didn't extend him. You gave up assets, and then you only had him for the one season. It's okay. Justin Coleman trade was good. The Frank Clark trade was decent. I guess that maybe is the one big trade that you've hit on, but when you swing for the fences, you're missing by a lot. And, okay, so if you're not bringing in talent well via trade, then there's only one venue left, right? Free agency. You can sign the big free agents. When was the last time the Seahawks signed a big free agent? When was the last time they went out and spent top dollar to bring in a really good guy from another team? I know sometimes they keep their own guys. They extended Wilson. They extend Baldwin. They extend Lockett. They extend Dwayne Brown. But what about going out and getting someone from another team? How often does that happen? I think the last time it happened was Michael Bennett. March 15th, 2013, that signing was made official. So we're coming up on the 9th year anniversary of the last time the Seahawks went out and got a primo free agent. And by the way, Michael Bennett, borderline primo. 1 year, $4.8 million, I think, was that initial contract. So, honestly, you could even argue Michael Bennett doesn't qualify. You might have to go back one day more to Cliff Averill, the day before. And that was 2 years, $13 million. So even that's debatable. You might have to go all the way back to Sidney Rice and Zach Miller, over a decade ago. The free agents we get, they're mid-level guys. Atba Rubin. Not bad players, but they're not single-handedly winning you games. They're not single-handedly moving the needle. Gerald Everett, good player, but not some Pro Bowl talent, not somebody who's making a ton of plays in every game he plays. The list of free agents that we brought in basically exclusively over the last 9 years, they're stopgap players. They're decent players, cheap players, Bradley McDougald. And don't tell me we haven't had the money. We have had the money. When we do have the money, we spend it stupidly. I think the biggest free agents that we brought in over the last 9 years in terms of a per-year basis might be Kerry Williams and Greg Olsen. I wish that was a joke, but it's not. So, you don't draft well, you don't trade very well, and you cheap out in free agency. So where's the talent going to come from? And now that the Seahawks have actually had a bad season, a season where they've lost more than they won, and it becomes even more clear that they need to replace their talent with new talent, rookies or veterans, whatever it may be, do you really trust this coach to do it? Because, again, we know that Pete Carroll has final say on personnel decisions. Snyder's the GM, but Carroll's basically the GM. He has more power than Schneider in this organization, for sure. So that's why I think Pete needs to go. He's been doing it this way for a long time. This is his model. He believes in this model. And I don't believe he can change. And this is just running the team stuff in terms of like the spreadsheets and contracts and documents. I'm not even talking about the weird stuff he does in game, in the middle of a season, like Kyle Fuller getting snaps at guard when you have Phil Haynes on the roster. How did that ever happen? I'm talking about like Trey Flowers. You know, I was okay with us putting Trey Flowers out there. And then we benched Trey Flowers, and then every single person we put out there in place of Flowers looks immediately better than Flowers, pretty much. And I was like, wait, why did it take us this long to realize that Flowers was actually that bad? What? All the experiments we try on the offensive line, Christian Sokolai, I can't even remember all the names of random people we tried to play on the offensive line, and it ended in disaster. Reclamation projects never really work out. Dion Jordan, just stuff that I swear to God, I honestly think other teams in the league, even the bad teams, laugh at us for trying. We are the only team in the league that does these things. We are the only team in the league that would have made Jimmy Graham play as an inline tight end. We are the only team in the league that would have made Jamal Adams play like a deep safety. And maybe you could find one or two other teams that would do that kind of thing, but I don't want it to be my team. I want to be one of the teams that does things smartly, one of the teams that does things that make sense. So you add it all up, you've got a pretty long track record of mistakes being made. The bad trades, the bad drafting, the lack of interest in bringing in top free agents. The reason why this team has managed to win the games that they have won, maintain winning records almost every year, have been because they've been riding the talent that they brought in before this 7-year stretch. Wilson, Wagner, those are the two main guys. And then they really lean heavily on the few guys they have brought in who have been able to put it together. Lockett, Metcalf. And then you have some of the successful trades they had, guys like the Dwayne Brown. They just ride those guys to the finish line. But at the end of the day, I think if you're being straight honest with yourself, you know that the 2019 Seahawks are one of the worst 11-win teams ever. The 2020 Seahawks are probably one of the worst 12-win teams ever. And our roosters what's the saying? The chickens came home to roost in 2021. Something's got to start replacing that talent, because the odds of us being able to get by on the backs of a few really good players, it's slim. We got by with it for a few years here, but I don't think Carroll's the guy who can revitalize this roster. So that's my plea. Carroll has to go, and that is why. Too many mistakes, too many obvious errors, and I don't believe he's the guy who can adjust the way he's doing things to revitalize this team. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. We'll see what happens tomorrow or later today, but waiting for word.